Let's start. Welcome everyone to this live session of 2-week refresher course in computer science on next generation technologies, sponsored by Ministry of Education. Today we have Priyanka Sharma with us. Priyanka has completed 1 year as CNCF General Manager and managed the foundation in a critical juncture of pandemic and provided vision to accelerate the growth of community to support the projects. Uh, to the projects and industry. She is now poised to steer the growth of CNCF in India with her superb background in community service and evangelism. She is a long-time open source leader with wide knowledge and connections in cloud industry, working closely with business and technology leaderships of CNCF. She has enabled whole technology industry and continuous building the cloud native ecosystem. Priyanka was previously director of cloud native alliances at GitLab, where she built the developer evangelism team that participates regularly in the cloud native community. So Priyanka is subject matter expert on cloud native and observability and has spoken about Kubernetes, Prometheus, Jaeger, Open Tracing, Envoy, Spire, and more. So she was a startup founder featured at TechCrunch Disrupt and started her career at Google. So thanks Priyanka for joining us today from US, and floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Such nice words. I have a feeling it's you and Prakash together who came up with them, and I'm very grateful. Thanks once again. So hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Let's get started. I have a lot of material because I figured I'll just give you a 101 course in all things CNCF to accommodate for all the different levels of knowledge we might have here today. If you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. And if we don't get to them today, happy to follow up later over Twitter, where I spend way too much time. All right, let's get going. So very quickly, I'll be talking about the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is the fastest growing open source community in the world. We have over 125,000 code contributors and the largest open source conferences, hundreds of projects. It's excellent. What's happened in the past few years, we started in 2015, but really over the last year and a half of the pandemic, we have solidified our technologies as the building blocks of all innovation that happens, because we are the key infrastructure layer. And as every business is digitizing and becoming a virtual business, they need cloud native technology to ship fast and resiliently. That said, I think this is just the beginning. As I will talk to you through the course of this presentation, you will see just all the industries, the people, countries, humanity that these technologies touch. So with that said, let's get going. Quick introduction to CNCF for those who may not have heard of us. We are the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and we host the most critical infrastructure technology open source projects. We started in 2015 when Google donated the Kubernetes Container Orchestration Project to CNCF, to Linux Foundation, under this subgroup that was formed called CNCF. And as I mentioned, we have hundreds of thousands of contributors today, and that's just talking about the code contributions. Oh, and by the way, I am going to look at chat maybe a couple of times through this presentation, so there'll be a little bit of lag, unless Vipin says, hey, Priyanka, stop and answer this question. I'm going to keep going and then take a few breaks to look at the chat. All right. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, as Vipin said, I'm the general manager of CNCF, which means every problem is my problem. So that's great. And as I also mentioned, I spend time, I'm always available to people because this is part of my job. This is part of my calling, is to help enable anyone and everyone to contribute to open source, to cloud native, and benefit from us. So you can find me on Twitter. This is my handle. Priyanka, as you know, is such a common name. I was never going to find it. So I've used this kind of mangling of my name, which is a handle I've often found. So it works out. I also serve as an advisor to startups that I find promising. Sometimes I invest in them, and then I'm an advisor at Heavy Bit Industries, which is an accelerator for dev tool products in San Francisco. Oh yeah, I live in San Francisco. Um, in the past, I've spent a lot of time in cloud native and DevOps. So ever since this was a very nascent field, I got involved. And that involvement started when I was working in a company called Lightstep, which just got acquired by ServiceNow. They created a project called Open Tracing, and it was in the observability space where you're trying to look at a large scale distributed system and understand what's going on. And you may use a technology called tracing. So that was what this was about. Open tracing ended up becoming the third project to join CNCF in 26, or was it end of 2015, early 2016. And since then, that was my first involvement with CNCF as a project contributor. I spent a lot of time in the community, had a really awesome experience. Then I moved to a company called GitLab, which is a single application end-to-end for from the writing of your code, source code management, all the way to CI/CD, security, and then deployment. At GitLab, I built alliances and evangelism, and that's where I got elected to the CNCF governing board, which was really useful because I saw the other side of this really vibrant community, which was how do the execs run this foundation? And then I was asked to lead, and it's funny though because I said yes to joining CNCF before the pandemic, and then I started right after the pandemic. And our conferences are the largest open source conferences in the world, so it was a lot of work for all of us to kind of pivot and give the virtual experience to people. Actually, many folks from India joined the last KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, which is our biggest conference. And so many students also came. So the nice thing about virtual has been that we've been able to spread our wings, meet people from around the world, and enable them to be part of the community without the barriers of plane tickets, hotels, visas, all of that. And just to round out what my background is, many years ago, I started my career at Google after finishing my undergrad at Stanford University. So from Indian parents' perspective, only undergrad, basically uneducated. By the way, just so you know, many years ago, I was born and brought up in India, which is why this was so exciting, this opportunity to come speak to folks. I did my 11th and 12th from DPS Archipuram. And before that, my father is a retired forest officer. So we used to live in many cities. And the one I remember the most was Jhansi. And I went to St. Francis Convent over there. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell. So now enough about me. Let's start talking about CNCF. So CNCF's mission is to make cloud native computing ubiquitous. Now that's a little bit of a tautological statement, because what does Cloud Native Computing Foundation do? Make cloud native ubiquitous. Like, what is cloud native is the question. Well, so let's take a quick history lesson. Before 2000, there was no virtualization in hardware. We were all using the machines and everything. Coming VMware in 2001, things really changed. Over time, we were introduced to the concept of cloud computing, with AWS doing an excellent job. And then innovation kept growing. And I think 2013, when Docker really brought containers mainstream, was a pivotal time in the recent history of software. And based on all those things came the cloud native era. When we think of cloud native computing, what we mean is basically loosely composable, connected pieces of an application that work together. Often they're broken up into microservices. These microservices may be packaged into containers, and then those containers can be dynamically orchestrated using a solution such as Kubernetes, so that you can do optimum resource utilization, as in use the right amount of servers, use the right amount of compute. Cloud native computing, I would say, is different from its predecessors in that just how small the different pieces of a monolith can be broken into. And they're extremely valuable because that means teams can focus on the very specific areas of their software that is critical to customers and end users. And they can also provide more resources to the right pieces. So you're not dealing with one large monolith at the software code base, but rather really sort of very fluid software system where you can provide resources, and whether that's human or compute, where you need to based on demand from your audience. I hope that's helpful. And I checked the chat real quick. It's all good mornings. That's excellent. I'll keep going. One of the very critical things that CNCF does is we provide a definition for cloud native, because this happens in many technologies, right? Like cool trends emerge, cool important things happen, but then either they're too tightly defined or they're so loosely defined that you can just kind of, everything is cloud native or everything is whatever. To mitigate that risk is why we provided the cloud native definition. And the whole point, as I said, was build and run scalable applications in modern dynamic environments. It's usually loosely coupled systems. And the key is they're resilient, manageable, and observable, which means you can make quick changes that are predictable and there's minimum toil, effort, risk, all of that. So that was a little bit about CNCF overview. Let's talk about the key thing about us, which is our projects. So as I mentioned, Kubernetes was the beginning of CNCF and Cloud Native, and Google was the company that started this project. In the beginning, they did 80% of their initial work at the point at which they donated Kubernetes to CNCF. Over the past 4 years, I'm very proud to tell you that their total work has increased manifold, but the percentage of total work on Kubernetes by Google has decreased to 25%, which means lots of other companies have jumped up and started contributing. And that is one of the reasons that Kubernetes is the mainstay in our ecosystem that it is today. It is because competitors of all kinds from all the countries in the world are coming together to collaborate on this open source project because everybody's success is tied to it. If you're interested, please feel free to read this project journey report that's linked here. We do a lot of content, so you can find journey reports and this and that about like, if you're interested in learning more, the lack of content is not going to be an issue. So we started with Kubernetes, but at this point, we are over 100 projects in CNCF, and they are at different stages of maturity. Alongside Kubernetes, there's a bunch of projects that we call graduated. These are projects that we are putting our name behind. We are saying these are battle tested and recommended for adoption by large scale enterprises, and they can go ahead with confidence. We are saying that by demonstrating that these projects have multiple companies in the governance, which means no one company can own the direction. Second, multiple large scale end users or people who use these technologies have utilized them in production successfully. And third, these projects have gone through a detailed security audit to tell us that they are indeed safe for utilization. Then there's a level below, which is the incubating projects. These projects are good, really good, and they have a diverse community working on them. They have people interested in using them. They're already in production in some places, but they are in process to, I would say, demonstrate all the things they need to get to graduated stage. And there's a lot of innovation in the projects you see here that are incubating. And then finally comes our, I would say, the bulk of the projects these days. These are Sandbox projects. So Sandbox was something we created recently, actually, just before the pandemic, which is a category which allows a young open source project, whether maybe it's just, whether it was started like yesterday, to apply to be part of the CNCF if it matches our vision for where cloud native is going. We don't ask for much. We just provide a neutral IP zone where you can bring your project, make it open source it, and that in that neutral IP zone that CNCF provides, it's your playing ground to attract other people to come contribute to your technology. You attract end users to take a look at what you're offering. And the idea is some Sandbox projects will fail and some will blossom and then go to incubated and then graduated over time. And this one is really exciting because when you look at, this is not the complete list, I don't think, but when you look at the full list, you'll see all the latest innovation that we see, right? Like edge computing, 5G, AI, ML, supercompute, all kinds of things are reflected in the projects here. So as I was telling you in the executive summary before, cloud native has become the building block of all innovation in the pandemic. And nowhere is it more demonstrated than in the Sandbox projects, because you see just how far and wide our reach is going, because people find the cloud native philosophy valuable and they're building on top of it. So really, I think at this point, everyone is on the same page. But just to be clear, the reason organizations are adopting cloud native projects is because they want better resource efficiency. That's something that Kubernetes alone can provide you. More services on less servers, like that's yes for any manager. Then, as I said, improved resiliency and availability. Because of this constellation of projects that we have created around Kubernetes, there is a lot of technologies available to ensure there's resiliency of anything that you build. Similar thing goes for multi-cloud, which is as companies get more and more reliant on cloud computing, they don't want to be stuck with one vendor. They don't want to have golden handcuffs of any sort. With Kubernetes, you are enabling, and the surrounding constellation of projects, you are enabling yourself to be able to change cloud providers, use many of them at the same time. You're in the driver's seat, which is what most people want. And at the end of the day, it's about higher development velocity. Every business is a technology business, and if you can't run fast and securely and stably, you're going to fail. So I want to talk a little bit about the governance of CNCF. This may be considered as a boring topic, but it's important because what's key in all these software foundations, they have been a mainstay in software for a very long time. But we believe CNCF is different. It's here to stay for the long haul. It's why I am talking to you here, urging you to look at cloud native projects and start utilizing them, learning them, etc. So a key part that makes CNCF different than other experiences you may have had is we believe in end user driven open source. Now I will decipher that for you. So you might be like, well, that's great. What's an end user? Well, an end user is somebody who is using cloud native technologies, but they're not a vendor. They're not selling cloud native based products or services. So as an example, Google or Amazon or Microsoft, they're not end users because they sell products that are based on Kubernetes and a lot of other projects. They are vendors. But another example would be of end users would be like someone like Spotify, someone like Uber. Sorry, I shouldn't. Yeah, can I say Uber? Yeah, ignore what I just said. Anyway, but like Spotify, when you think of DoorDash, which is a food delivery network, when you think of Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, all these companies, these are end users because they're not selling any cloud native tech, but they're using it to build their own technologies for their customers. We actually have a program for these people called the End User Community, which is really thriving. It's a lovely place for folks to get together who are just end users without vendors breathing down their neck and talking about what technologies are working and how they are solving their problems as they're going into production with new stuff every day. We actually had a really good, two very good keynote talks last month, no, 2 months ago at this point, at the KubeCon Cloud Native Con EU, which a lot of folks from India attended. And one was Peloton, which is the cycling, which is the hardware that you can buy, the cycle machine, which has the trainers, etc., that go on a video screen and train you. So Peloton went all in on Kubernetes during the pandemic, and they had to hire at that time to be able to shift all their workloads to cloud native. And so they told the story of that. That's a great example of an end user. Another great example, we had the government of Ireland present because they used cloud native principles and technologies to build their contact tracing app for COVID-19. And that app, that technology was then, I think, a bunch of other governments borrowed from what the government of Ireland did. And that was another example of just cloud native principles, cloud native technologies being used by end users who are not selling anything, but just utilizing our tech. If you want to learn more about all the stories by end users, I highly encourage you to go to this web page, which is cncf.io/case-studies. This has like 87 stories of all kinds of companies from different countries, India included. There's 3 Indian companies in the mix over there. So you can read those to learn more about how people have seen real business results by utilizing cloud native technologies. Going back to the governance structure, as I said, the end user community is a key part of our governance. Now, traditionally, just to paint the comparative view for you, traditionally, people have a governing board that's made up of vendor companies, and then they have a technical oversight committee that's made up of technologists who care about the projects that are in a foundation, and those are the people who run. And as I mentioned, we changed the game by adding an end user community and tightly coupling it as making it a triumvirate that runs CNCF, governing board, TOC, end users. And they have like subgroups underneath that are marked here because they can't do all the work. The governing board really quickly is like the business oversight. I report to the governing board regularly with what we're working on, what are our updates, etc. They make budget decisions. The TOC, as I mentioned, defines and maintains our technical vision. I work closely with them. They are 11 engineers who are respected in the field, who are elected by various people, various bodies, and they bring in new projects. They decide if some project needs to be archived. They get the feedback from the end user community, and this is like the heartbeat of our CNCF comes from the TOC. End user community I already described is basically they coordinate and drive activities important to end users, and they participate in members only groups, and they also create a lot of research and content for the wider ecosystem to learn from. These are some things I'll skip over. These are the subgroups that are part of the governance. We have a marketing committee, technical advisory groups, end users. If any of this interests you, read it on your own time. There's links here that can help you learn more as you want to. So now let's quickly talk about members. So members are folks who join a foundation by paying dues. These are companies, nonprofits, governments, all kinds of organizations. And they join and pay dues to support a foundation because they believe in its mission and they benefit from it. Today, we have 630 plus members around the world. They are from 6 continents, only Antarctica is not covered. All the major worldwide cloud providers are members, most of them platinum, which is the top level, which tells you how important we are for their business. And as I mentioned before, we're very, very serious about our end user network, and we enjoy the largest end user ecosystem of any software foundation out there. These are just some logos. You can see all kinds of companies from all kinds of parts of the world are part. Platinum members, you see Apple, you see AT&T, you see Intel, you see AWS, Google, etc., etc. You'll also see, by the way, here, academic and nonprofit members. I think for this audience, that might be of interest. We have a totally different pricing for academic and nonprofit because we understand that there's the financial equation is different. And it's really important to us to collaborate with folks like you because you are where a lot of the cutting edge comes from. So for example, we have like a really good relationship with CERN, the Hadron Collider Lab in France, Switzerland. We also have great relationships with MITRE, which is, I think, DC based, Wikimedia Foundation, all kinds of people who are valuable to the ecosystem can join in. There's lots and lots of silver members, and they are often like startups, young companies that want to make a mark in cloud native, and it's really exciting to have more and more join all the time. All right, oops. Yeah, and as I mentioned, largest end user community of any software foundation. We are 140 plus members, and they are some of the biggest names that you might have heard of. Like you see Twitter over here, my favorite company. You see Airbnb, you see Apple, Audi. There's a lot of names here. I want to see more Indian companies listed here, by the way. I want to see more logos from India showing up here because the reason these people are joining is because it's valuable to their business. And I want to see Indian companies taking advantage of all the offerings that CNCF has. As I mentioned, there's clear benefits. They navigate the system. It's very different when you're a vendor and a project contributor versus an end user who's just trying to service their own customers. And joining CNCF helps them navigate. They also get access to top engineering talent, and then they can think about their open source strategy with us. Then there's something we do, which is called Kubernetes, certified Kubernetes service providers. These are consulting agencies that help folks implement cloud native, and you have to go through a certification process with CNCF to get this badge of honor. And there's 190 plus out there. And I know there's a few key Indian companies that are part of this list. There's also what we call the Kubernetes training partners. These are folks that have companies hire to be like, hey, I'm going cloud native. I need someone to come train my staff. They hire people like these. And they also they have to go through a vetting process through us to be able to say they're a KTP. And then the same applies for certified Kubernetes. By the way, this one program has been so critical to the success of cloud native, because with certified Kubernetes, we have established what it is that counts as Kubernetes. In the past, there are so many examples of critical open source projects where different companies just took different, different versions, different version numbers, and then built off on their own, and was still called whatever project name. To be able to say that about Kubernetes, you have to pass through the conformance tests and go through these API tests that we have set up. And this has given control over our own destiny, and given the end users the benefit that anywhere somebody's saying they're a Kubernetes-based provider, you know exactly what it is. It's not going to be different, which also means you can change providers as needed, which means the end user is in control. End user holds the power. And yeah, there's a lot of details here about how the certification works. I highly encourage you, just go ahead and read through it. I think if you have any interest in offering a Kubernetes-based products, this is required reading for you, basically. Now let me talk a little bit about our ecosystem programs. These programs, I know this is the academic community I'm talking to here, and you will find different things that resonate for you and for your students. The thing I'm most proud about CNCF is that it's really a foundation of doers. We are a community that all the contributors, all the participants, even the media folks who are interested, everyone's very driven to keep building. And the staff, CNCF, which I lead, we are always working as hard as we can to keep up with this very vibrant community. And so there's a bunch of staffed services and programs that we offer. And the idea is to be an end-to-end experience, both for the projects and for the communities. So for example, CNCF provides technical documentation teams. We provide developer relations help. We do security audits, as I mentioned. Alongside, we also run unique modern marketing programs to get people interested in projects. We have ambassadors, we have events. We do a lot of things to sustain and enable this community. Here are some resources which I said would be useful for you. So technology. For some people, right? For many people, well, everybody, I should say, you have to start somewhere. And the best way is to understand the definitions. So a group, and by the way, this is again, a group of community members came together, we provided them the scaffolding to work in it, and they have come together to create a definite glossary list. You can go read this and understand the basic definitions of what we are saying and what we mean when we say these words in the cloud native community. So I highly encourage anyone who doesn't know anything about cloud native, go check this out. Actually, one thing that I don't have on the slides, which is even more fun to check out, is this thing called Phippy.io. Phippy is a cartoon giraffe who is a PHP application looking to modernize herself. And it's a cartoon story of exactly what happens as she goes through her journey and makes new friends. So that's even better. Actually, yeah, I will revise this deck to say, start with Phippy, then go to this more serious cloud native glossary. And then this, I know, is Prakash's favorite visual in the world, which is the CNCF landscape. This landscape has generated more buzz, more drama, more interest than anybody else, because just look at it. It's insane. It's got so many logos. So people look at this and are like, how am I even supposed to decipher this? Well, the good news is you're not supposed to decipher this. You just need to look at it to understand the scope of cloud native and how much it is growing. And then once you have, gone through the FIPI cartoon book, you've read the glossary, you've started thinking about how to utilize cloud native in your life, that's where you go to the landscape to pick what kind of technology you're looking for, and then you can zero in on it. So for example, if you're looking for a Kubernetes training partner, you have a very nice visual representation on this, you see bottom right and one over. So it's a very good tool to go find what you know you want. And when you don't, just look from afar and understand how, how dynamic the cloud native ecosystem is. A key part, because it's about finding what you need, is that there's a lot of filters, etc. So you see them on the left side. I pointed this out because sometimes people miss it and they're like, how do I do XYZ? And it's like, we need to improve our user experience, but in the meanwhile, here's where the filters are. Another piece of content that may be very useful to you is something that our end users create, and that's called the technology radars. These radars, the end users come together, pick a topic. So you see here, for example, we did continuous delivery in 2020 June. We did secrets management in February 2021. And what they do is they come together, they make a list of all the technologies they're using internally, talk about how the experience went, and then share that in a publicly available research. So this is a way the end user community is helping the wider ecosystem. And it's really interesting reading, and I highly encourage everyone to look at it. That's the most fun part, the community programs. So as I said, our events are pretty popular. And so KubeCon Cloud Native Con is the flagship. It's the largest open source conference in the world. It just happened. And the coolest thing with it, in my opinion, is that not only do we have the main cloud native topics, we also have small co-located events that are about the latest, coolest stuff. Alongside that, there's Kubernetes Community Days. We actually recently had the Bengaluru one, and that had, I think, 1,600 people attend, which was excellent. And then there's local meetups, etc. So check this out when you have time. Then, this was the slide I really want to talk to you about. So for the educators, for the students who are listening, you really need to focus on this, training and certifications. This is the best way to get serious about cloud native. We have an online course on edX for Kubernetes. We have lots of training materials, but most importantly, we have the certified Kubernetes admin, certified Kubernetes application developer, and certified Kubernetes security specialist exams that we offer. These are not easy exams, so you'll have to study a little bit. There's actually someone called Sayam Pathak, who is, I see him here already. You should ask him if you have questions about how to pass these exams. He knows way better than I do. He even runs a Twitch show about it. He can help you out. Sorry for signing you up, for calling you out like that, Sayam. But yeah, this is number one. Like if you're gonna you get your students ready for cloud native, if you yourself are gonna be ready for cloud native as a young person, or not a young person, anyone at all starting out in cloud native, take these exams, get the cert. There's also mentorship programs. Someone I know, Mrityunjay, he's a student from Lucknow, I think. Yeah, and he got a mentorship program in CNCF, and since then he's become a contributor to Kubernetes. He's gotten all kinds of great job offers. So these mentorship programs are also really important to look at for summers and all that. And then there's the ambassadors and speakers bureau, etc. I know I'm going way over time, so I'll go quicker. I'm sorry. I told you I'm giving you a full 101 on CNCF so that after this you have every information you need, and there can be no excuses for why you've not checked us out. Then, as I was saying, everybody can contribute to open source in general, but cloud native is well known as a particularly welcoming community. For code-based contributions, I have a list here of technical advisory groups or work groups you can join based on your interest. If you don't know where to begin and it's early, I would say focus on the stuff I said before of read the glossary, take a CKA, and get really familiar. And then that'll, I think, help you contribute more to these code-based contribution phases. But that said, you can also jump in right here and just start helping out with documentation as a starting point. There's also some industry specific work going on with like telco, for example. We have the cloud native network function efforts, which if you're in telco industry and you know stuff about this, join in. We're like changing how telcos can move really quickly, honoring their OpenStack legacy, but also helping them move forward to incorporate Kubernetes into their story. Um, Contribution is not just code based. There are people who are creating the technology resources you saw. They're in the cartographers group that people just come together. They write about the landscape to demystify it, trail map, all sorts of things. You can create a Twitch show, be like Sayam, and you can also contribute to our blogs. So there's lots of opportunities. When you're a member, you have even more with our marketing committee and online programs, which I won't go into the details here because we don't have time. Really quickly, membership, the top level, yes, it's expensive, but it's super worth it for the largest companies in the world. And I'm telling you, we have platinums from everywhere. We're from US, Europe, China, other parts of the world. We need to see Indian representation as well. And then there are different tiers. As I said, academics and nonprofit, it's totally different ballgame. We welcome everybody. End users, we also want to make it really accessible, so it's much more cost effective for end users to join. Lots of benefits. I'm gonna like breeze past this. So mainly people join as vendors when they want market amplification. They want people to know that they are in the cloud native space. They know what they're doing. They want to do thought leadership. As I said, I'll breeze past this. Lots of marketing benefits, PR support, content, it's etc. Oops, sorry. Oops, what did I do? Oh, I clicked something. Huh? LOL. Okay, back. Then there's lots of networking opportunities. The top platinum members get to join the board that I interact with all day, every day, do market research, etc., etc. This is a chart you can look at later if you know companies that are interested in potentially being partners and members of CNCF. Final wrap up, what makes CNCF unique? Open source software foundation that makes cloud native computing universal by working with end users. These numbers are out of date. 100 plus projects, 125,000 plus contributors representing 177 countries. In the pandemic era, a lot happened, but it really solidified us as the baseline for all innovation. We grew 20% in terms of members, 50% in terms of contributors, and over 100% in terms of projects. So you can see this is proof, if nothing else, that cloud native has only just started having its moment. I'd like to point out, India, I'm very proud of you, everybody, is like number 4 in contributors for all CNCF technologies. Let's get that number up. Let's get to number 2. Let's get to number 1. Let's keep working on it. But this is excellent over here. And then finally, as I said, cloud native is not just about Kubernetes. It's not just about the projects we have today. It's about the future. I told you that in KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, the coolest thing is that we have all these like small co-located events about new cutting edge technologies. The last one we had a Kubernetes on Edge Day, Kubernetes AI Day. We had a Magma Day, which is for telco people. We had a Security Day. We had a Rust Day. It's like there was also like a WASM, WebAssembly Day. So this tells you the scope of how much cloud native is evolving and how much the future innovation is going to depend on us, which is why I believe it is critical for every one of you who's listening to pay attention, start learning, start contributing, and joining in as fast as you can. Finally, I would like to let you know that all our OKRs from a staff perspective for CNCF are available publicly. You should check them out. Over the 5 years, we want to build sustainable ecosystems for containers and beyond. And that's what refers to our expanding scope. And we will always be the end user driven open source foundation. So that is all about CNCF, as fast as I could go, as much as I could put together in one presentation. I hope you found that valuable, but I am happy to take any questions now or later, however folks want to do this.
So I think we have first question from Prakash itself. So he's asking something in chat. Prakash, can you unmute yourself and can ask, please?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so we want to see that you promote we are in fourth rank, as you said, in terms of contribution. Uh, what we want to see is during your tenure, I don't know how long it will be, as long as it is, let's hope it is forever, but we have to be practical. Practically, what can we get you to see that India is on the map at a higher level in every sense? Contribution, uh, not only that, joining as the members, like you said, universities and industry. So at least from university point of view, we want as many universities. So if you can put out some benefit plans for them, hopefully we can help you in uh, getting more numbers in the university area, at least in
Absolutely.
this fall.
I absolutely
So
will.
when are you coming to India? Let us know. We will try to get you into all universities. You'll have no time for yourself. Yeah, go for it.
Family. No, definitely. I think I actually am very seriously when I come to India. I do this in every region I go to, so I definitely should do it in India, which is 1 week of roadshow. Of we go meet universities, governments, companies, contributors, individuals, everybody. I do this in America. I live here, so wherever when I go to a specific city, I'll do it. When I go to Europe, the same thing happens. When I go to China, the same thing happens. If I'm going to Australia, same thing. So when I come to India, this is definitely number one priority. 1 week of work before I can go hang out with my family. And I would love to meet folks in universities to support them on their cloud native journey. And we have examples of a lot of success stories already, which will be helpful. And as you saw, it's a very nominal, like we really try to make it easy from like a financial perspective for universities to join in. But the biggest benefits will be around materials they can use to then educate their students. They can, and then like, the events they can enjoy, how they can plug into the sort of open source Linux Foundation cloud native ecosystem. So absolutely, there's a lot we can do, and I'll get my material ready.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Go
Thank
ahead. Other questions?
Thanks, Priyanka. And I think now universities and governments are also moving towards cloud native ways. This is the only way left, I think, in
I know
software.
exactly.
In the software world, this is the only thing left. So what I see as such, so I'm involved in some part of NIC, and they are also moving towards cloud native. And as a universities also, I'm looking now, everyone is looking
Yeah.
how Kubernetes can be the base layer for everything. So yeah, thanks. And yeah, welcome in India. So anytime, so when you come, yeah, we should have like a road show in universities so that we can have more engagement in universities as well. I think Sayam also shared some. Yeah, Sayam, would you like to
Oh,
add
yeah.
something on
Yep.
student?
Yeah, that was a fantastic presentation, Priyanka, as always. Basically, we recently started Cloud Native Students Community, and we kicked off that, and it is growing very well. So there is a community.cncf.io where you can actually see all the CNCF events and the student communities there. There's a student Slack channel in the CNCF channel itself, CNCF Slack itself. So you can join that. So all students can join that, and they can learn. There are a lot of shows that I have done, and I'm doing continuously on my channel, but it's part of the students as well, because I try to do it from the scratch with the folks in the community. So like today is learning Rust. So that is something which is growing, and then tomorrow is learning Q, which is another awesome project that Solomon Hikes, who invented Docker, he's working on Dagger, which is based on Q. So I mean, things like that are evolving, and students community is definitely evolving. There will be a separate KubeCon track at KubeCon track student track, which will be there. So which is very exciting. So next year you will be like, this year there will be, but next year it will be more evolved. There will be complete, you will be able to submit the exact CFPs for the student track, and it will be really good. So it is getting picked up because we see more and more student interest, more and more universities get interested in learning cloud native, which is very good, because this is very this is an overnight changing technology that we are working in the cloud native ecosystem. So we should be in a position, especially the students, they should be able to be adaptable to the change that is happening. So which is very important, which is why we want to welcome students as much as we can. So I think that should answer the question, like how students get involved.
So one
Excellent.
remark, can you make it for something special for teachers, faculty, university faculty?
That's
They are
important.
students, but they are teachers of the students, right? So can you have
No,
something for the gurus?
no, absolutely. Actually, that's very important. And at least some of the small things that we do is like for the big events, right? Like the KubeCons, etc. The academics get a totally different pricing. It's like super cheap for them because we want to get them in and help them help their students. But I think what we have not done, which you are making a really good point, we should, is kind of put all the stuff together in like if you're an educator, here's a package of stuff you need. So yeah, but there's definitely, if anyone's an educator, they will basically get into our events very cheap or free. If they want to take these certifications, there's also like options available to make it affordable for them. So basically, if someone just indicates they are an educator, they'll get a lot of things much easier. But we will, on our end, I think, put together things into a package.
Yeah. And also,
Thanks.
could you add more on how teachers can collaborate more in terms of, let's say, do you have any SIG or something like this in CNCF where academicians can join on research or something?
Actually, a lot of academics, yes. As I was telling you, like, folks from CERN, folks from MITRE, like all kinds of research institutions, there's actually a lot of work that happens. A lot of times it's within like the end user community, basically, and like people kind of find a subgroup and go from there. So yes, a lot of activities happening. In terms of the exact resource, let me find that for you if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
But like the number one thing would be join as a member, get into these sessions and have conversations with people like you from different parts of the world.
Yeah, so we have a
And we
list.
can actually, like, now that I'm talking to you,
So I think Parth shared some
yep,
here
exactly.
the CNCF Academy. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we can do is like, how do I say this? What we can do is like, let's, when like a couple of people come in to the end user group, we can create a SIG that's specific to academia. We were actually already talking about that. I don't think we did it, but we already were talking about that. So it's like, if once we're very much in that sense, like a company where when there's demand, we totally respond to it. So um, we can create a SIG within the end user community for academia for sure.
Also, we have speakers from CERN as well. So Ricardo is also taking part, so we can ask him as
Oh,
well.
Ricardo's here.
So
Yay. Oh, talk to him. He'll tell you everything. He's much better person to ask than I am.
he
And
was,
there's a question, are SIGs being renamed?
yeah, he was my mentor at CERN, so call him to take some.
Everyone's here. Yes, Prakash, SIGs are being renamed if they are, well, so the Kubernetes SIGs are staying SIGs, but the CNCF was having a TOC level SIGs as well. Those have changed into what we call tags now, or technical advisory groups. So CNCF SIGs are now CNCF tags. Kubernetes SIGs are remaining the same.
Also, Priyanka, is there any way that how academicians, like academic institutes, can join? Is it like MOU based, or how they can join? Like if they want to join, like do they have to send something as a mail or what?
Yeah, so honestly, like the simplest thing is info@cncf.io, but people can also, let me see here if they have that. If people can also go to this URL, I'm going to put it in Zoom, where there's like, if you scroll, it's a horrible page, we're reworking it, but when you go to the bottom, you can just hit become a member, and then it takes you to an online actual e-sign thingy. If people want to do online e-signing, they can also just email us on info at, and then we can, if somebody prefers like not e-sign.
Okay.
So these should be useful. Yeah. And actually, but I do think this session has been so helpful for me because I'm realizing when you're targeting the students, you have to talk to talk to the teachers more maybe, and that's something we need to. So Sayam's here, so I'll just like, Sayam, you work a lot with Bill too, right, on my team, so we can kind of like work with Bill to incorporate the educator instructor aspect, because we just started this student outreach this year and we got a much better response frankly than expected, and now we need to kind of keep building on top of it, right? And Bill on my team is the person I've assigned to work on this, and people like Sayam work with Bill, so I think this is good real-time feedback for us, Sayam.
Yeah, definitely. And we can do something like the curriculums, CNCF curriculums as well, with which the academy institutes can collaborate with CNCF, so they can have a joint curriculum syllabus, and they can provide that. I think there can be a lot of things that can be incorporated over the time.
Yeah, that will be really helpful if we can teach CNCF stuff like Kubernetes, a lot of things from CNCF in the academia, so that students can get a real hands-on in the early days. I agree. And
Absolutely.
are you working on
Absolutely.
this,
No.
or is it already available, or it will come in future? This.
So it's tricky. There's information and materials available already, and the challenge is packaging it for like a educator and be like, you just need to look at this. Like right now, for example, if somebody goes to our edX Kubernetes course, that's right there, right? If there's also training materials for like studying for the certification, that's also available. All that's there, but it's not packaged in a way to like tell an instructor like, okay, use this, use this, use this. Like it's just there. It's like out there for people to kind of figure out on their own how to make the most of it, if that.
So I'll add to it. When first time I went to invite you and Arpit, I sent a mail and the response came from educators saying that, hey, we have got all this course. Do you want us to do something? I said, first you package it for the requirement which is required by the Indian universities, understand the requirement and come up with a package which is affordable, and then you deliver to the faculty first, because then faculty needs to be, students learn okay randomly, but then somebody has to really put them in the right perspective what is needed, and that is where the uh, CNCF can be of very, very high value. And that's where if you add to that benefit, we can make the universities to pick up the bills for at least to the extent which they can afford. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So you can work with your education team. That's my suggestion. They were eager to participate.
Excellent. Oh yeah, it's probably Bill.
I want to add, so like for academics, I agree, but for the governments as well, like nowadays governments are also looking into open source things, right?
Yes.
So if we have something from CNCF in terms of how they can see things in a better way, because right now if you tell them, okay, open source things or something, then it's really tough, in adapting these open source in India is really tough right now, but that's what changing, with cloud native it can be done very easily. So people know Kubernetes very well and people understand this cloud native culture. So if we can have something for governments as well, where we can push a lot of things in academia, government, and then this whole open source culture can be built around, that will be really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I'm taking notes for my roadshow.
Yeah. So I think we are running out of time now. We have so on this behalf, the organizing team, Open Technology Foundation and Teaching Learning Center, Ramanujan College, University of Delhi, we extend our heartfelt thanks to you, Priyanka, for taking out time and interacting with our participants. We really hope to have more engagements with you in near future, maybe in the roadshow. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time. This is my first time speaking to an Indian audience and way overdue. Thank you, Prakash, for making this happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your wonderful time taking off from July 4th weekend. I'm sure. Thank you.
All good. All good.
Okay.
All right. Bye
All
bye,
right. Take
folks.
care.
Have a good rest.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.